This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, as the US comes back to work, where are people working? Employees trust themselves, but not their colleagues, nor tech. Not in my backyard gets clever pushback. What do MSP's customers want? And Gartner's 5 privacy trends by 2024. All this and more. Hit those like and subscribe buttons and help us pay the bills. And here are this week's stories. It's the first day back to work in the US after a long holiday weekend, so appropriate to talk about everything we see in the landscape. The Washington Post examined over the weekend design changes happening in the suburbs. Developers are now designing new spaces for work-from-home employees, with examples like outdoor setups with tables, power, and Wi-Fi. The core idea? Offer alternative workspaces closer to those at home. Axios 2 with the redesign of the workplace. Will it look like a Starbucks? Twilio and PagerDuty are profiled as they redesign office space. Insider looked at the flood of remote workers into small cities and towns in the US and the struggle to keep up. These Zoom towns might respond to short-term struggles in housing, which are solved by building new houses. That may not be as easy as you might think, and the piece digs into the why. With some reporting here, Axios noted a working paper published by the National Bureau of Economic Research. Remote work drove the home price surge and may be responsible for more than half of the surge in pricing. Remote work led to about 15 percentage points of the 24% average increase in house prices between December 2019 and November 2021. And not just remote work, but possibly age-related too. In the annual Axios Harris 100 poll, 77% of those whose job can be done remotely value their employer allowing that when they want to. And it skews by age. 84% of millennials say it's important, 66% of Gen Z, 75% of Gen X, and 68% of boomers. The current situation matters too. 93% of those remote and 89% of hybrid workers say it's important, versus 57% of those back in the office. Why do we care? So, disruption in housing, city planning, where workers are, and in what they want. Well, sounds about right. These broad pieces highlight the issues, and where I think this is practical and useful is your local interpretation for you and your customers. If you're rural versus serving a suburb or a city center, or all three. That's also true of your interpretation of the data around age. What is your staff makeup? What are the demands of each? I intentionally presented the data to be broken down and applied to your specific circumstance. That's where I believe the value is. Notable to me, millennials are often thought of as young. Well, it's all perspective. Many are in the early kid years, so the interest in working from home makes some sense to offset childcare. Remember that detail. As employers, consider that most of the factors to consider are likely below your visibility line. A new Morning Consult poll asked about monitoring employees. Roughly half of tech workers who are not monitored at work would resign rather than be subjected to facial recognition or have their employer record audio or video of them. The survey also found that more than half of tech workers would not take a new job in their field if the company used a surveillance technique. Let's pair that with another piece of research. Cisco looked at the views of remote workers on their reliability. And while employees say they can be relied upon, they don't feel the same about their coworkers. 75% of respondents said their manager trusted them to be productive while working remotely. Yet a lower proportion, at 61%, felt their colleagues could be trusted to do the same. Workers also felt that bosses were more likely to micromanage when working remotely or in hybrid arrangements, with 73% of respondents reporting those micromanaging behaviors had increased. All this in a landscape of slowing hiring. Protocol noted 61 tech companies with layoffs in May, with about 16,000 employees laid off. Note that tech is considered contrasting to other industries, with U.S. employers generally adding more jobs than expected. Why do we care? Employees believe they can be trusted, but naturally distrust others, and they don't want their bosses using tech to watch them. This is why culture will be so critical now, and those that are bad at it want everyone back in the office. Managers can't use the tech to monitor employees, and instead will have to do the hard work of building trust in teams. And they'll have to do it without everyone being next to one another. If you're not investing significant time in this problem, you should be worried. Before the long holiday weekend, the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee urged the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency to implement new ransomware reporting rules as quickly as possible. In a 51-page report, an increase in the number of attacks on U.S. schools, local governments, and healthcare facilities took center stage. Also of note, explicitly calling out the number being underreported. Quote, both federal agencies and private companies raised concerns regarding the lack of visibility into the full scope of ransomware threats and cryptocurrency ransom payment, the report explained. The report noted that both the FBI and CISA both claim to have the one-stop website for reporting attacks, ic3.gov and stopransomware.gov. Speaking of the FBI, they warned in a new alert that Russian cybercrime is leveraging network credentials and VPN access of employees from U.S. colleges and universities. Most come from spear phishing. And speaking of underreporting, it's not just a U.S. problem. Royal Holloway in the UK also released a report focused on this gap. Finally, as an update to a story we've been tracking, Costa Rica took another blow on the ransomware front as the Hive operation hit the public health service there. Their computer systems were taken entirely offline. In an IT services twist, it seems Conti, who was responsible for the attacks that resulted in the national emergency and statements of war I've previously covered, has actually partnered with several organizations, including Hive, as Conti itself is slowly shutting down. Why do we care? This should be a notable point for those who cover partnerships in the channel. The Ransomware Operators Partner 2. How about that? A morbid validation of the partnership model for sure. So, is it the FBI or CISA that leads? That debate will need to be shaken out and worth watching over time. I'd offer for technology companies that either seems like a perfectly reasonable starting point, and note that the real value is in the reporting. Be prepared to report. It's going to be critically important ongoing. And the way to get prepared is before you need to do it. Are you still relying on a frustrating patchwork of legacy solutions? Modernize your cybersecurity and data protection with Acronis CyberProtect Cloud. It's a single solution that combines backup, anti-malware, and endpoint protection management. As an MSP, you can easily improve client security posture, eliminate complexity, and generate more recurring revenue. Learn more about Acronis CyberProtect Cloud at acronis.com. A study by the insurance company Marsh with Microsoft has found that less than 2/3 of company decision makers believe cyber insurance is worth the cost. That's up 30% since 2019. Why do we care? Well, that's the data point, just the one. Decision makers are doubting the value of cyber insurance. I can't say I'm surprised. Costs are going up, it's a lot harder to get, and for me, the most critical argument would be that if you're prepared for the incident, you might not need it. If you have a specific plan to deal with a breach, which includes the predisposition to tell the criminals to F off, the plan may assume some level of downtime and have a plan to offset it. Sure, it would be nice to have the insurance payment, but it's unnecessary. Now, do I believe that 2/3 of companies are ready? No, I do not. That said, it seems like a solid position. You don't need insurance because we have the plan ready to go. This is what that incident will look like and what it'll cost. That seems sensible to me. Here's a clever use of tech. Fast Company reported on a new SimCity-like platform that allows communities to submit plans for development projects. If a resident objects to a development project in their own backyard, the tool requires users to put forth plans that meet preset housing targets, thus requiring people to bring solutions, not just, not in my backyard. Called Balancing Act, it's It's already being used in cities in Northern California. Why do we care? While a very cool piece of tech, my interest in this was the approach, empowering those with objections to offer alternatives. Instead of saying, we don't want this one thing, the system forces the objector to wrestle with the challenges the decision maker is handling. And that approach felt worth highlighting. Where are other places we could apply this? I'd offer that our entire space of services likely has areas this approach would work on. Don't worry so much about needing the tech, consider the process. A bit of state-of-the-market data from IT News in Australia. Unsurprisingly, the number one reason to select a provider is their level of support, and it was an obvious lead. The main service being sought? Security, again with a distance over second place. Infrastructure, 33% versus 28%. The main benefit of working with an MSP? Access to skills and expertise, 40%. Distant second at 20% is the ability to scale up. And the number one reason to switch providers? Responsiveness. Now, why do we care? There's nothing explicitly new here, but asking customers specifically what they want is never a bad thing. It's worth saying in a straightforward way. Your customers are there because you pick up the phone, can solve their problems with skills they don't have, particularly with security, and will leave you if you don't respond to them. You don't have to read too much into this one to get a clear takeaway. Some insight into quitting via Axios, and I'm quoting the piece. The quitting bonanza among leisure and hospitality workers that helped define the Great Resignation is starting to cool. It's heating up in other industries, Axios' Courtney Brown writes. The new quitting hotspots are tied to the housing market, where job openings rose to or near record highs. The quits rate in the real estate sector surged more than any other industry, from 1.9% to 3.5% in April, the highest in 18 years. In March, construction was the industry that saw the most significant jump in quitters by a full percentage point to a record 3.3% before backing off in April. The leisure and hospitality sector quits rate is still historically high, but it fell to 5.7% from 5.2% in March, the most significant since March 2020. And a small insight on where empty offices are. The cities with relatively long commutes. A Wall Street Journal analysis with two key lines. 8 of the 10 major cities with the most significant drop in occupancy in the office during the pandemic had an average one-way commute of more than 30 minutes in 2019. Meanwhile, 6 of the 10 cities with the smallest drop in office occupancy have average commutes of less than 30 minutes. Why do we care? I wanted to highlight the quit data because the trend appears to be moving around industries and different sectors at different speeds. Your mileage may vary, of course, and as always, the reason is less about you and more about your customers. If your customers have stumbles, you're going to feel the repercussions. The other was the simple commute data. There's a tendency, including me, to overanalyze the data. It could just be as simple as saying, employees hate long commutes and now have an option. Your takeaway is to be flexible for valuable staff. Research compiled by the Frank Recruitment Group has found that the majority of Fortune 500 companies with a female CEO are typically more profitable than those helmed by a male CEO. According to the findings, 87% of the top 500 companies last year, led by a female decision maker, reported above average profits, compared to just 78% of companies without a female CEO. Despite companies being led by female CEOs making up the highest percentage of profitable enterprises, just 39 of the 500 companies have a woman in charge. Why do we care? Well, there's a reason I talk about diversity, and it's the fact that I think having it gives businesses the ability to outperform. And here we have data saying female-led companies are more profitable. Knowing this audience's demographics, let me observe that for male leaders, are you getting enough alternative perspectives? Gartner with some specific privacy trends they're expecting through to 2024. specifically 5. And why 2024? By the end of 2024, Gartner predicts that 75% of the world's population will have personal data covered under modern privacy regulations. So what are the 5? Let's quote Channel Life. Data localization. In a borderless digital society, seeking to control the country where data resides seems counterintuitive. However, this control is either a direct requirement or a byproduct of many emerging privacy laws. The risks to a multi-country business strategy drive a new approach to the design and acquisition of cloud across all service models, as security and risk management leaders face an uneven regulatory landscape with different regions requiring different localization strategies. As a result, data localization planning will shift to a top priority in the design and acquisition of cloud services. Privacy-enhancing computational techniques. Data processing in untrusted environments, such as the public cloud, and multi-party data sharing and analytics have become foundational to an organization's success. Rather than taking a bolt-on approach, the increasing complexity of analytics engines and architectures mandate that vendors incorporate a by-design privacy capability. The pervasiveness of AI models and the necessity to train them is only the latest addition to privacy concerns. Unlike common data-at-rest security controls, privacy-enhancing computational opportunities protects data in use. As a result, organizations can implement data processing and analytics that were previously impossible because of privacy or security concerns. Gartner predicts that by 2025, 60% of large organizations will use at least one PEC technique in analytics, business intelligence, and cloud computing. AI governance. A Gartner survey found that 40% of organizations had an AI privacy breach, and of the breaches, only 1 in 4 was malicious. Whether organizations process personal data through an AI-based module integrated into a vendor offering, or a discrete platform managed by an in-house data science team, the risks to privacy and potential misuse of personal data is clear. Much of the AI running across organizations today is built into larger solutions with little oversight available to assess the impact to privacy. These embedded AI capabilities are used to track employee behavior, assess consumer sentiment, and build smart products that learn on the go. Furthermore, the data being fed into these learning models today will have influence on decisions being made years down the line. Once AI regulation becomes more established, it'll be nearly impossible to untangle toxic data ingested in the absence of an AI governance program. IT leaders will be left having to rip out systems wholesale at great expense to their organizations and to their standing. A centralized privacy UX. Increased consumer demand for subject rights and raised expectations about transparency will drive the need for a centralized privacy user experience, or UX. Forward-thinking organizations understand the advantage of bringing together all aspects of the privacy UX: notices, cookies, consent management, and subject rights requests, handling into a single, one self-serve portal. This approach yields convenience for key constituents, consumers, and employees, and generates significant time and cost savings. By 2023, Gartner predicts that 30% of consumer-facing organizations will offer a self-service transparency portal to provide the preference and consent management. Remote becomes hybrid everything. With engagement models in work and life settling into a hybrid, both the opportunity and desire for increased tracking, monitoring, and other personal data processing activities rise, and privacy risks become paramount. With the privacy implications of an all-hybrid set of interactions, productivity and work-life balance satisfaction have also increased across various industries and disciplines. Organizations to take a human-centric approach to privacy, and monitoring data should be used minimally and with clear purposes, such as improving employee experience by removing unnecessary friction, or mitigating burnout risk by flagging well-being risks. Now, why do we care? I'm convinced this is a space to make money and deliver real value around data privacy. It's That's why I spend time on it. Mining this for value is clearly an opportunity. Most customers will not be able to do this on their own. So, step in. Google is merging its two messaging apps, Meet and Duo. Left standing will be Google Meet, and Duo will be rolled in. Although on mobile, Duo will become the primary app named Google Meet. I did want to also highlight Microsoft's investment in collaboration apps too. At Build last week, the company focused on enhanced features within the space, including task management, video conferencing, and messaging. Microsoft also rolled together its existing identity and access services and announced a new decentralized ID one under the product name Microsoft Entra. The three parts of Entra: Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which is an existing identity and access management service; Permissions Management, which is a rename of Microsoft's acquisition of Cloud Knox Security, a cloud infrastructure and entitlement management service for detecting human and machine identities and activities; and Verified ID, which is a new decentralized identity product to come. Why do we care? Being so focused on the work layer, changes in these collaboration apps will be increasingly important. Where before operating system changes would be significant, this is the new space of interest. I highlighted Microsoft's investment in digital identity as I consider it an underdeveloped and badly needed space. As the previous story highlights, if privacy is coming, then control over digital identity is the partner in crime to data privacy. Thanks for your time and attention. Time is a finite resource, and I really value you giving me some of yours. If you like this video, you can let me know with a like of the video, and even more valuable, hitting the subscription button. My content is all free, and I use metrics like subscriptions to pay the bills, so it has real value. The content here is produced under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you're interested in more content like this, you can get access to content early via our Patreon at patreon.com/MSPRadio. It's our give what you want model where you set the value of what you think the content is worth. If you like this podcast, you can catch it daily as the 5-minute news and commentary show, The Business of Tech, available on all your favorite podcatchers with links at businessof.tech. Just hit that big blue button to subscribe. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen, and I really value the interaction. If you want to say something in the comments, I do respond and watch all that, and I look forward to talking to you next time.